Alright guys, today I did want to go down a little trip down memory lane and take a look at all the different graphics packages and on-screen scoreboards we have had over the years in the AFL, and we are going to be kicking things off today with this one. Back in 2002, we know Channel 9 did have AFL footy on the screens from 2002 to 2006, and they pretty much had a similar scoreboard in that tenure. Now you can see here it is pretty basic and pretty bad, you would say, by modern standards, but it was consistent with the sort of graphics packages that Nine were running at the time. There was a slight variation. In the first year, this one you are looking at is 2002. The first year they did have the footy on TV, and you can sort of see next to where it says Port Adelaide there is a little, or two little semicircles, sort of silver, on either side of the scoreboard. And this is how it looked in 2005. A bit more clean, but again very similar. You did have the little yellow mark which denoted which quarter you were in. Going through here again, you do see some alternative views. I did like how they had the stylised club logo and sort of jumper there, but pretty basic, very early 2000s. This definitely does show its age, and you would not be rolling this sort of graphics package out in 2024. But I have to say, I think Nine did do a reasonable job of the AFL. We know they didn't have any finals footy in their package, so you didn't really have those volume of big games, big finals, memorable finals that you would get on some of the other networks. But all in all, they did a good job. They did have the Friday night game every week, and also two games on the Sunday. I believe, from memory, one of those two Sunday games they did show as an extended highlights package for about an hour back to back. I think they used to show the 1 p.m. Eastern game live and then carry that extended highlights of one of the other games. So again, that is a very prehistoric media rights deal by modern standards, but again, they did a decent effort in their 5 years carrying the footy. And we will take a look at the other free-to-air network that did start carrying the games in 2002. That is, of course, Channel 10. The background here being that Channel 7 was the sole carrier of the AFL footy on the commercial networks for a long time. I think maybe the ABC might have had a year or two in the 80s, but certainly from the mid-80s all the way through to 2001, it was just Channel 7 in terms of free-to-air TV. But at the end of the 2001 season, the rights did go to 9 and 10, and 10 got all of the finals. 10 also carried the doubleheader on Saturdays, so you did get the afternoon game kicking off at about 2 o'clock Eastern time into that night game at about 7:30. And they used to put, before the game, I believe it was called, back in between it, you did have Sam Lane, Andy Marr, Strawny. For a lot of kids that were sort of born in the 90s and grew up in the 2000s, Channel 10 was a big part of the childhood of that generation. And I think they did a really good job carrying the football in general. You did have some pretty iconic grand finals in this period, some great players, some great final series as well, and the graphics package was pretty clean. The commentators were good. You did have Anthony Hudson, Tim Lane, Stephen Quartermain. You did have Robert Walls on special comments, as well as Malcolm Blight. Now, in terms of the scoreboards, this was the starting effort back in 2002. Pretty basic, again, very dated by modern standards. You do see the score that popped up after the goals when it did go back to the centre. They sort of kept this theme for the whole time they did have footy, and sort of generally improved on it sort of year on year. This one is from 2004, so they did carry this in 03-04. It is a slight improvement. You do have the more flat design. It is all blue, which you could argue looks pretty bad, but really, I mean, what more do you want here? It's just got the score, it's got the time, it's got the quarters. Move on, they did change it slightly in 05-06. They lightened up that blue and introduced a bit of a red sort of theme. In 05-06, we remember those Eagles Swans grand finals, of course. And I really like the scoreboard that they did show after a goal when it did go back to the bounce in this era. Very classic. I think this, would hold up today. It's quite modern. You do have a little bit of a gradient theme. They did a good job of incorporating 10's colours and also the AFL's colours, as well as the colours of the competing clubs on the left-hand side with the logo, and they had the little nickname in a diagonal basis there as well. This was a little weird one that they ran. I think it was about 3 rounds, from round 1 to about round 3 or 4 in the 2005 season. They did have the logos there on the right-hand side. Looks a bit strange. They obviously dropped this one pretty quickly. It is strange how they had the time bunched up on the left there. If they had that over to the right, maybe it would have been a little more balanced, but this one did not last long going forward. This was what it looked like in the latter stages of the 2005 and 2006 season. Very clean. This was more or less the same design they had for the rest of their time carrying the AFL through to 2011. The later package that they had from 2007 did not change until they lost the rights at the end of the 2011 season. And I think this is probably the best AFL graphic that was on TV for any network. This is iconic. It's very timeless. You could roll this out today and I don't think anyone would have a problem with it. And some people will say, oh, you want the logo in there, you want a bit of colour, but I really don't think it matters. Maybe you could argue that, new fans aren't going to know which team is which, but you are probably grasping at straws when you get into that level of detail. And who can forget, of course, the 5-minute warning? Now, some people hated this, but I personally loved it. Remember, this is before the era really of smartphones and apps. So this would never really work today because people would just look at their app and see, on the AFL app, it does say how long is left. For those that don't know, when the clock went below 5 minutes in the last quarter, it would flip and start counting up in a red colour. So you would see, for example, 28:39, and then it would count up 28:40, 28:41. Like you do see when you go to a game, they don't have the countdown clock, they have that count up clock. So the idea was you would never really know how long is left when you're watching on TV. And this was before the time when the runners would be out there telling players exactly how long. I don't think in the mid-2000s they did have the time on the bench either, so the players didn't really know either. So there was some pretty crazy events that did happen late in games. No one really knew how long was left. You think of the David Zaharakis, the Leo Barry mark. There has been plenty of countless moments in the 5-minute warning. And we will be moving on to Channel 7, who, as we know, is the free-to-air carrier to this day. Now, Channel 7, as we said earlier, did have the rights for a long period of time until they lost them to 9 and 10 in 2002. But at the end of that 5-year period, they did get the rights back in 2007 and they replaced Channel 9. So they did carry the Friday night and also a Sunday afternoon game. In the first 5 years of that, they did share that with Channel 10. So we remember the grand finals did alternate in that broadcast rights period. But in 2012, they did become the sole carrier of the game on free-to-air TV and have remained as such. And this was the first effort back in 2007. You can say there's a little bit of shadowing sort of going on there. They kept the 7 colours, the sort of red theme, which was a little bit different. And you will notice with 7, they did move the scoreboard down into the bottom left corner of the screen. With 9 and 10, they did have it in the top. This was the effort in 07, as we said, and they did sort of upgrade this one a little bit for 2008. And they did carry this one all the way through to 2012, so this did get a decent run. So this one actually did not have a 5-minute warning, so you remember the Channel 10 clock that we did talk about before. So the games you did have on Channel 10 would count up in the last 5 minutes, but these ones would count down, which was a little bit interesting. This is a pretty clean package. I mean, similar to that 2008 one, you do have the black and red theme. Really not much to say here. It is similar to the 10 one. They just switched the location around. But they did do a big rebrand in 2012. So as we know, 10 were no longer broadcasting games here. And they did start writing the full name of the clubs in that sort of elongated setup. You do have a little bit of a gradient. You'll see the right-hand side of the black box is a little bit lighter, which you could argue looks cheap. There has been a big move into that minimalist sort of flat design in the late 2010s, so this does look a little bit dated. And this era was really interesting because 10 and 7 previously in the previous arrangement had broadcasted games in full HD, but remember 10 was running 1 HD and Channel 7 was broadcasting games on Channel 70 HD. But in this 5-year period, they really broadcasted games only in standard definition, which was really poor for a developed country and does leave a little bit of a sour taste in the mouth when you think of Channel 7. They probably have improved things in recent years, but you could argue the commentators in this period, you do think of Bruce McAvaney and Dennis Cometti, who no doubt are legends. You could say they went on for a bit too long, but I don't think anyone can have too many complaints with some of the commentators that are getting around these days. But this package, again, is pretty simple stuff. No logos during live action, but you can see here there was a variation at the end of quarters and the end of the game where they did pop the logo there, which sort of looks like the next one I'm about to show you, which is a variation they did run from 2018 through to 2020. This one is quite nice, you've got to say. They have flattened things out. You don't have that white mark on the right-hand side of the black box. You do have the club logos in play and they are shown throughout the broadcast. This is pretty clean. The one knock you would have on it is the length of the club names obviously does vary. So you do have some clubs that do have really short official names like Carlton. And when they would be playing a West Coast Eagles that does have a really long name, you do see this big gap between it. Now, it is not a massive issue, but it just looks a little bit messy. And another nice little feature they added for finals in 2019, and they still have this today, is the gold portion of the time and quarter marker there on the left, which does look pretty classy. Just elevates the finals a little bit above the home and away package. And you do associate that with the higher stakes that you are going to get in September. And in 2021, they did pivot and they did adopt the current scorecard that they are running today in 2021. This one doesn't have the team name or abbreviation. And you could argue that new fans aren't going to be able to identify the club name simply from the logo, but they sort of have counteracted that because they've colour-coded the remainder of the scorecard to the team's jumpers, which is a nice touch. You got to give them that. And this is the variation they do show at the end of the score. And you can see how they've changed Fremantle. Normally, if that was a home game, it would be in a purple box with white writing, but they've flipped it obviously to match Fremantle's white jumper there, which is definitely a nice touch. And we do just see again the gold variant for the finals. And as at 2024, Channel 7 are still running with that graphics package. And lastly, we do have Fox, who, as we know, are a paid subscription TV carrier. And these guys have had the footy from 2002 onwards. And the first effort in 2002, 2003 was just the same as Channel 10's. So I'm not sure why they didn't have their own in that period, but definitely were running the same package. The first effort here in 2004 is a little bit interesting. They did only carry this one for 1 year. You do have some triangular aspects going on there. You've got the red and white and black theme, which I'm not sure why they had that. That wasn't the colours of Foxtel or Fox Sports at the time, but potentially they did just want to differentiate themselves from Channel 9 and 10. Looking at it now, you could argue that this is better suited to maybe a Channel 7, but as we know, Channel 7 were not a broadcaster at that point in time. They did bring out this one in 2005 through to 2007, I believe. Sort of an American style package with the sort of info bar along the bottom, but they never utilised this to show any news or, scores from other games or anything like that. It was just a lot of empty black space, which is a little bit of a shame, but This is a pretty clean package, certainly unique. Hasn't made none since, but they have pivoted back in recent years to that sort of black theme. 2008, they did bring out this variation and introduced another new colour into the foray, which with that orange. I don't love this one. You do see it is a bit strange there on the left-hand side how you do have this different sized text. Obviously, the abbreviations of some clubs will either have 2, 3 or 4 letters, and you should really be keeping that one consistent in terms of font size across the board. The orange and blue, don't really know where that came into it either. Looks like Fox were really just throwing stuff around at this stage. This one only stuck around for 1 year. In 2009, they did switch to this blue and yellow number. A long, skinny thing at the top of the screen there. Again, this is not great. I don't like it. I think the blue and yellow was the Fox Sports sort of theme, so they did want to incorporate that and match it up with their Fox Sports logo. If you remember at the time, that was blue and yellow. And in 2011, they did sort of keep the same fundamentals, but you can see there they've added the little club icon. I don't mind that. It's definitely gone that way in recent years where you do want to have some sort of colour or logo in your scorecard just to have that common theme with the clubs that are playing. And 2012, the following year, they did pivot and start operating under that Fox Footy brand instead of Fox Sports. Remember, they relaunched the Fox Footy channel in the 2012 season. This was part of a new rights deal, and we know Channel 10 stopped broadcasting the game in 2011. So from 2012, Fox did start carrying every game of every round live, at least for the home and away season, and every final except the grand final, which we still know is the case today. This is probably arguably one of their better packages. They did initially run with this one early doors, which is pretty bad, you got to say. It is too long, and for some reason they had both logos on the left-hand side. They didn't have them next to the abbreviations of each club, which is a little bit strange. You see they've gone with the red and sort of grey, which was the colours of the Fox Footy logo, and the accompanying graphics packages there. But after a few rounds into that 2012 season, they did stick with this one. And I really like this. Very clean. It has got the club colours there, but not the logo. And you do have, obviously, the same size font, which is a big tick. Again, AFL scoreboards, there isn't too much you need to have on there. Just the two teams, the score, the quarter, and obviously the time. They did do a good job with this one. In 2015, they did change to this one. If you remember at the time, Fox were running with that triangular sort of banner branding across the network. So they did just want to sort of incorporate the club colours into those flags / banners in the triangular side. Again, you see the club colours, which is a theme at this point. They have slightly changed the font. I didn't mind this one too much, but it did only stick around for a year, where they refined it just a little bit. In 2016, I think you did have the pattern of the actual team's jumper in that little triangle rather than just the colours. The rest of this is the same as the 2015 stuff. The next refresh was in 2018, and this one, again, is very good. You do have the colours there, but they have incorporated that into the actual abbreviation, so you don't have the colours as their own little separate section on the scorecard, which is pretty redundant. But this does a good job of conveying who the team is and what colours they are wearing. I don't think they used alternative colours when a team was wearing a Clash jumper, which is a bit of a shame, but definitely all in all, a pretty nice effort here from Fox. In 2020, they did tweak that design a little bit. They stacked the two names on top of each other and started showing the goals and behinds, which this was actually the first time it was done on TV. I have no idea why no one ever thought to do this before. Obviously, footy scores have been displayed this way in the ground forever, so it was a bit unique to sort of have the goals and behinds up throughout actual gameplay, not just appearing after goals and at quarter and half and three-quarter time. As we know, when you go to a game, you do see the scoreboard displayed this way, and I do like it. It is a nice little touch. Channel 7, I forgot to mention, they did follow suit the following year, and you will see that in the 2021 through to 2024 package that they are running now. And finally in 2022, Fox did pivot and go to what is now the current package. They did keep the goals and behinds, which I like, but I don't really like those little circles on the left-hand side. It was much better when it was just incorporated into the club abbreviations. I don't know about the black theme as well. It is a little bit basic. It does look a little bit cheap, I think. But Fox do like having a common theme across all their networks. So if you look at Fox League, if you look at Fox Cricket, they will also have predominantly black scoreboards now. But that is all we're going to have time for today, guys. Don't forget to subscribe.